bad guys of Final Fantasy games challenge the iconic heroes we know and love, driving the narrative forward and also providing a central point of conflict throughout the games. These bad guys often possess unique abilities, have tragic backgrounds, or connections to the game's lore, or maybe even the main character, and this adds a lot of depth to the overall story, with the presence they have being very crucial in shaping the game's world and engaging players as we play these games and discover the epic struggle between good and evil. So in today's video, we're going to be ranking the villains of Final Fantasy. Yes, you guys asked for it, so I'm going to do a villains ranking list. How exciting. Now, before we get to the list, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, or if you're not subscribed to the channel, and leave a comment down below. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my list. I'm interested to see what you guys think. Now, just a heads up before we do get to the list, no, I am not including the MMO games for two reasons. I haven't played 11 and I don't really have the time to, and same goes for 14. I played 14 on launch back when it first came out and I fell out of it. I do not have the time to play that, so I am not including that. I'm very sorry if this upsets some of you diehard MMO fans, but that's life. Not everybody's going to agree or enjoy the things that you like, and that's okay. So let's hit number 14 here with Garland from Final Fantasy 1. Garland is a knight who becomes corrupted and seeks power of the four crystals and sends the world into chaos. As players progress through the game, you discover Garland's role in the unfolding events, and of course you eventually confront him as the final boss. And yes, he's the first boss in the game, but stuff happens and you have this time warp. It's pretty cool. Bear in mind that Final Fantasy has evolved over the years, and of course later entries are going to have different villains and different storylines that are more fleshed out, but Garland is pretty good. Coming in at number 13 is going to be Cloud of Darkness from Final Fantasy III. In Final Fantasy III, the Cloud of Darkness is the main villain or the antagonist and serves as the final boss of the game. The Cloud of Darkness is an otherworldly entity representing the embodiment of darkness and seeks to engulf the world in eternal darkness, erasing the balance between light and dark, which is pretty interesting. The final battle against Cloud of Darkness takes place in the World of Darkness, serving as the climax of the game, and players strive to save their world from impending doom. I feel the boss battle and the villain was pretty meh, honestly, so it wouldn't go any higher than the 13th spot for me. Much like the other list here, we're going to get the first three games out of the way, with number 12 spot being taken by Emperor Mateus from Final Fantasy II. Now, what's interesting is that there's two sides to this Emperor. There's light and dark. The version that the party sees during most of the game is the light side, or his light soul, of course, meaning not as good. And then we have the dark side, who we see much later in the game as the final boss. So a bad guy with one soul who could split himself into two parts, both incredibly evil. It's really interesting. I think it's pretty cool. Okay, now we're going to start getting into the territory where a lot of you guys are going to start disagreeing with me, and that is okay. But that being said, number 11 here is going to be going to Vayne Solador from Final Fantasy XII. Vayne Solador is a charismatic and ambitious political figure who becomes the primary antagonist as Final Fantasy XII's story unfolds. Vayne is driven by a vision of a powerful and united empire. Now, as the story of Final Fantasy XII progresses, Vayne's role becomes more central and more obvious, and his actions and motivations become integral to the political conflict that shapes the narrative of the game. That being said, I found him to be an incredibly forgettable villain, especially when compared to some of the later entries in this video, or even compared to some of the bad guys within his own game. For a while in Final Fantasy XII, I actually wasn't sure who the main bad guy was going to be. It's one of those games that you actually have to play it all the way through to truly understand who the villain is. But that being said, I think the judges, or maybe Judge Gabranth, for example, would have made a better or more interesting final showdown. Coming in at the number 10 spot is going to be Exdeath from Final Fantasy V. Exdeath is a powerful sorcerer who seeks to gain control over the power of the Void to achieve ultimate power and reshape the world according to his own desires, ultimately erasing everything, good and evil. What's interesting is that Exdeath is pretty much an evil tree. Yes, I said it, an evil tree. You see, over the course of nearly 1,000 years, there were evil spirits that were sealed within this one specific tree, and that caused it to become so corrupt that it took humanoid form and Exdeath was born. It's honestly really crazy. Exdeath's ultimate goal is to harness the power of the Void, destroying everything like I mentioned, and it's almost in a sympathetic way too, getting rid of good and evil, happiness and sorrow. It's an interesting way of going about things, but in the end, Exdeath is just another war casualty. Okay, hitting the 9th spot from Final Fantasy XIII is going to be Barthandelus. Barthandelus from Final Fantasy XIII is a powerful fal'Cie, an otherworldly being with immense magical and technological capabilities. He manipulates events in the world of Cocoon to fulfill his goal of summoning the godlike creature known as the Maker by plunging humanity into a crisis. He serves as the driving force behind much of the conflict of Final Fantasy XIII, orchestrating events behind the scenes to manipulate the main characters, including Lightning and her companions, as part of the grand plan. His motivations and the true nature of his plans become central elements of the game's narrative as players progress through the story. Now, how I felt about Vayne is pretty much how most people feel about Barthandelus here in Final Fantasy XIII. Not really enough time on screen, not really fully fleshed out, and it's a boss that you don't really even realize is there or is the final boss until kind of the later half of the game. So one of those what ifs of Final Fantasy, but I don't find myself thinking anything more about this one beyond the context of the game. Radio for the next spot, number 8, we have Golbez from Final Fantasy IV. Golbez is initially introduced as a mysterious and powerful antagonist working behind the scenes to further his goals in Final Fantasy IV. He is associated with the main antagonist forces, manipulating events and characters from the shadows like Kain. As the story of Final Fantasy IV unfolds, players learn more about Golbez's past, his motivations, and his connections to Cecil, his brother. Now, the relationship between Golbez and Cecil is a key element to the game's plot. Of course, is essentially a twist at the end of Final Fantasy IV and gives him more of a human element, and Golbez's role evolves throughout the game. And once you discover who he is, you kind of, again, with a lot of these other bosses or final villains or whatever you want to call them, you find that there's a bit of a sympathetic trait to them, and I don't know, it kind of humanizes Golbez a little bit more. So with number 7, we are actually giving that to Ardyn from Final Fantasy XV. Ardyn is a really interesting one. If you played the base game of Final Fantasy XV, you might not actually appreciate his story and his complexity, but let's sum it up really quickly. He's the brother of King Somnus, who is like the original king in Final Fantasy XV. Stuff happens and Ardyn was cast aside by his brother. He was then cursed to be immortal and then imprisoned. Ardyn eventually learned that he had originally been chosen to be the founder king until his brother betrayed him, and this leads Ardyn on a long journey to destroy everything his brother built upon, and that includes the one true king, our hero Noctis. It's actually a really tragic backstory. And I think knowing that lets you appreciate this character a lot more than the base game would. And unfortunately, it's one of those things that fell victim to a game that wasn't totally complete or totally whole. But with all that backstory intact, Ardyn's actually a very tragic character, which again, you can feel pretty sympathetic for. Okay, number 6 spot. A lot of you are probably going to disagree with me for this one, but we're going to actually give that to Ultima from Final Fantasy XVI. Ultima, the ultimate villain from Final Fantasy XVI, a game that's full of bad guys anyway. Ultima is cold, detached, arrogant, absolute, and believing to be superior to all. And this is what makes Clive a great foil, someone who calls him out on his BS pretty much. I actually didn't know who was going to be the bad guy in Final Fantasy XVI, and I found Ultima to be one of the more interesting modern villains purely because of his mystique. Ultima and his gang were responsible for creating magic and thus created humanity to produce the Mythos, a being with unimaginable power which could be inhabited by Ultima. Funnily enough, this is actually a game where you get to kill God. Yes, Clive goes head to head with his own creator. It's pretty cool, and yes, fits that stereotypical JRPG thing of killing God. And Final Fantasy XVI does a pretty good job at it. Okay, with number 5, we are going to one of my favorite classic villains from the Final Fantasy series with Seymour from Final Fantasy X. Seymour serves as one of the primary adversaries faced by the main characters, Tidus and his party, as they embark on their quest to defeat the monstrous entity known as Sin. Seymour's character is complex, and his motives are intertwined with the central themes of Final Fantasy X, particularly regarding the cycle of death and the teachings of Yevon. Throughout the game, Seymour's actions and decisions become increasingly questionable, leading to some difficult confrontations with the party, especially from the moment you meet him. You know that he's bad news, and Seymour becomes increasingly more sinister. From the initial meeting to the forced marriage to learning that he's summoning his own mother, Anima, and then of course the really difficult series of boss battles that you have with Seymour towards the end of the game. It's some pretty rough stuff, so make sure you're prepared, but Seymour is a classic villain, and I really enjoy his presence throughout the game. Okay, we got 4 left. Do you guys have any guesses of which way it's going to go? Well, let's tick number 4 off here with Ultimecia from Final Fantasy VIII. Ultimecia from Final Fantasy VIII is a powerful sorceress with the ability to manipulate time. The game's plot revolves around the efforts of the main characters Squall and his friends trying to stop Ultimecia from compressing time and achieving her goal of becoming a singular, all-powerful existence. Ultimecia's influence extends throughout different time periods in the game, and her motives and connection to the other characters become more clear as the story progresses. The interesting thing is the attempt to change her destiny, which she unknowingly sets in motion the same events that will eventually bring her demise. There's a lot of people that also make the comparison that Rinoa is Ultimecia. I don't think it's ever been officially confirmed by the director of the game, but it's certainly interesting to think about. So Ultimecia is a very interesting villain. However, I do wish that there was some more background information, kind of detailing why Ultimecia is doing what she's doing, other than trying to pretty much preempt her fate. But I don't know, of course it doesn't work out for her. 3 left, and the number 3 spot is going to be taken up by Kuja from Final Fantasy IX. Kuja is a flamboyant and mysterious villain. His role in the story is revealed gradually as the story progresses, initially seen as the puppet of Queen Braun, the ruler of Alexandria, but later he emerges as a significant threat with his own motives and ambitions to destroy his very own creator and surpass his brother, Zidane. It's crazy. I really enjoyed Kuja's character arc as well, going from the bad guy to, at the very end, realizing his own humanity. He's a sympathetic villain. Of course, I've said that word many times here in this video. And he's got understandable goals, and honestly, a very convincing threat for most of the game too. Okay, we've got the last 2 here. It's pretty much a toss-up, and I'm sure for you guys watching out there, it can go either way. But before we get to that, did you guys know that 98.1% of the people that watch my channel are not subscribed? Yes, that is a huge number, so please consider hitting the subscribe button and hitting a like. It does make a difference, especially for your smaller content creators like me. Anyway, back to the list. I'm going against everything inside of me to hit this number 2 button. But for number 2, we're going with Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII. Now, I'm saying going against everything inside of me because I'm such a massive fan of Final Fantasy VII, but aside from that, Sephiroth is a very powerful and iconic character known for his striking appearance and memorable presence within Final Fantasy VII. Sephiroth is a former member of Soldier, an elite military unit, and was once considered a hero, but after the incident in Nibelheim, where he learned who or what he actually is, he becomes driven to use the power of the planet, known as a life stream, to become a godlike being and reshape the world according to his vision. Throughout Final Fantasy VII, players encounter Sephiroth as a formidable adversary, and his influence looms large over the events of the game. Sephiroth's character, unlike a lot of the other ones on this list, has had a long-lasting impact on the series and is widely regarded as one of the most iconic video game characters ever. So yeah, safe to say Sephiroth is an incredible villain, an iconic villain. A lot of people would say holds the number 1 spot, but the number 1 spot is actually going to go to, that's right, Kefka from Final Fantasy VI. Kefka is a highly eccentric and sadistic character with a chaotic personality. Initially, Kefka serves under the Emperor Gestahl, but as the story progresses, Kefka's ambitions and actions lead him to become a major threat in the world of Final Fantasy VI. Kefka is notable for his nihilistic views and his desire to bring about destruction and chaos. He plays a central role in the game's plot, and his actions lead to the destruction of the entire world. Yes, he actually destroys the entire world. He is probably the greatest Final Fantasy villain. I don't think any other Final Fantasy villains follow the blueprint of Kefka purely just because he's so crazy. And you really have to play and enjoy Final Fantasy VI to truly appreciate how maniacal this guy actually is. From killing people, poisoning people, pointlessly killing people as well. He does it all for the fun of it. Honestly, it's really crazy. So there's my villains ranked. Do you agree with this list or do you disagree? Either way, I really appreciate all you guys for tuning in and leaving all your comments and having some great discussions. Whether you agree with me or whether you disagree with me, I think the cool thing about videos like this is that it brings us all together to celebrate the one game series that we truly love, which is Final Fantasy. So thank you again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And as always, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Otherwise, we'll see you again on the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Take care. Ta-da.